works for you. Okay, I'm going to close that just so it's out of our way. Then we have global refinements here, which means it's going to affect the entire selection. This one's smooth, so if you have something that's got a very curved edge, you may want to add just a little smoothing to that. It gets rid of a little bit of the jaggies. We can feather something. Photoshop does a really good job now of cleaning edges and keeping them very nicely cleaned, but if you think the edges are a little too hard, a little too brisk for your composition, here's where you can go in, and something like this, I would put in a very tiny feather, if any at all, so a 0.3 to a 0.5. And if you wanted the contrast to change, you can see how as we up the contrast here, it brings a little more definition to the darker hairs. So I'm just going to bring that up just a tiny, tiny bit. Shift edge, if you put in a positive number, it's going to make the selection bigger by that many pixels. If you put in a negative number, it's going to make the selection smaller by that many pixels. So if I tell it to shift edge by -1 pixel, see, as I go up and down here, I'm doing it more, so you can see it's going to actually cut stuff off of the edge. If you've got some sort of a haloing that's going on, which means you've got a little residue along the edge, that may be something you want to do, but I don't think we need to do that in this case. Okay, for output settings, how do we want this to present? Decontaminate colors, I have heard, and I've heard this from a number of people, that it can kind of foul up how things are working, so I would avoid that in most cases. You need this when you are photographing somebody in front of a very vibrant color and the color kind of washes into the edges of the selection. There are other ways to deal with that, though, that work better. You can do a new layer with a layer mask. We're just going to come in here and go to selection, so it's going to output to a selection, and I'm going to tell it to remember the setting, so I don't have to put all those in the next time. And then I'm going to click OK. Okay, I want to back up just a little bit and show you some of the options that I kind of skipped over as I went through this. We have over here, I told you, the quick selection tool, which is awesome for making selections. This is the edge detection tool. So if I come in here and tell it I want to clean up those edges, that's exactly what the edge detection tool is for cleaning up the edges. And you can see even then, did a pretty nice job of doing that. And down here, we have a brush, and this is the brush tool. It works if you're familiar with masks, which you will be in a couple of weeks, so if you're not, this is part to kind of ignore for the moment and then come back to in a couple of weeks. This is showing us our mask. This is the part, the white part is the part that's selected, and you can see how it goes into those little wispies. The black part is the part that's not selected. So if I have my brush here, and I'm painting with white, it's going to add to the selection. If I want to get rid of some of these wispies, for instance, I would switch to black. Sorry, I got to go back over here. Right there. Okay. I want to click right here on the minus to paint with black, and that way I can go in here and get rid of some of those wispies. I'll zoom in so you can see. So if I wanted to get rid of some of those wispies. Also remember the hardness. The brush can have a feathered edge or a little bit of a soft edge, which makes it look a little bit more natural in a situation like this. So there I go with smoothing out some of the wispy hairs if I want to. Now I don't want to flatten out her entire hair, but there are times when you have just one or two stray hairs and you've got a very smooth style and you would want to do that. I also have a lasso tool in here, so if I wanted to come into this area, for instance, and tell it that I want to add to the selection there, right there is to add, that's to subtract, that's the intersection of the selections. And I can zoom in using the zoom tool, and I can move around using the hand tool if I'm zoomed way in and can't see the whole thing. So those are the tools on the left hand side. These are your view modes over here. This is how you're looking at it. I can look at it on layers. That shows me the layer beneath. So if I have a background that I'm working with, I can see how good it looks on the new background right away. This is the mask mode that shows me the selection in black and white. All right, so this is just a selection shown differently than in marching ants. This is the same exact thing as marching ants, but just viewed differently. This is on white, and the reason it doesn't look white is because I have the opacity down, but you can see if I'm going to put it on white, I want to put the opacity way up to 100% to see how it will look on white. Same thing with black. Right there, that's how it would look on black. So you can see over here, if I were putting it on black, I might want to deal with this a little bit more carefully. Okay, this is an overlay, which just like the black and white, except this is clear and red. So the red would equal the black, the white would equal the clear. It's just another way of looking at your selection. It's the way we would look at it in quick mask mode, which we'll talk about in the future as well. And this is your marching ants, the way it looks there. Onion skin is, generally speaking, one of the best ways to look at something, and you can change the opacity of that as well. So it's going to show you the previous background here. We've already taken it off that, so that's why it's not showing it to us. But I wanted to show you those options as well. I'm going to cancel out because we've already made the selection on this and putting it on the background, and it looks just fine. One more fun thing I want to show you while we're here is one of the new options in Photoshop, and I have to come up here to this layer. Again, don't worry about the layers thing at this point because we're talking about layers in much more detail in week 3, but I cannot kind of isolate layers from everything at this point, so just kind of roll with me a bit. Okay. And filters. Filters are the fun house of Photoshop. There's all kinds of fun things you can do with filters. But one of the new fun things with filters is under the Liquify menu, you have a facial aware Liquify. And Liquify just means turning something into liquid so that you can kind of move things around and reshape things. It automatically sees the face. You can see as I'm going over this, it shows the outline of the face, it shows where the nose is, shows where the mouth and the eyes are. So it is aware of how the face looks, where it is. If there's more than one face, it numbers the faces here and goes left to right. So I can change, by these sliders, I can change the eye size. She's a little squinty, so I can change her eye size. I can make her eyes open up. I can change how high the eyes are. I can change the width of the eyes. Okay. I can change how they're tilted, whether they kind of move up and down. And I can change the distance between the eyes if I want. You've got that option for all of the facial features here. So if I wanted to thin her nose down a little bit, make her look a little bit more pouty, I can actually make her smile a bit more. There we go. How's that? I can make her upper lip a little bit thicker if I want, lower lip thicker or thinner. As you move the sliders around, you see the differences there. And I can change the height of the mouth. And kind of cool too is that I can change the face shape. So in this case, I may want to thin down her face a bit, or maybe I just want to thin down her jawline. Come in here and thin that down and leave her face a little bit wider. Okay, so that is, and I'm going to click OK here so I can show you there's the before, there's the after. So you've got a really cool tool here in the new Photoshop that allows you to kind of change the facial structure and improve it. Now, I wouldn't change the facial structure for a client other than to maybe thin down a jawline a little bit if the person's heavy, and like her, open her eyes up if her eyes are looking a little bit squinty. That's a huge difference in her eyes. She looks very squinty there, and then I added a little bit of a smile. So It doesn't really change the way she looks all that much, but it's a great tool to have, and it's a lot of fun to work with. And if you're working with models, you can really change the way a model looks and make her look very, very high fashion. So that's a really fun little tip that I wanted to add on at the end here. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please be sure to put them in the discussion area for me, and have fun with the new Photoshop features.